What is the current research on MPNs? This question will be first answered by Mr. Ricci, and Dr. Gerds will provide more information.
Thank you, Laura. I'm just going to provide a brief backdrop of research in the area. The MPN Research Foundation was founded around the year 2000, and our goal was and remains to find a cure for the MPNs, or at minimum that the MPNs can be treated as long-term chronic conditions and preclude the evolution to a fatal situation such as AML or acute leukemia. And when we first founded the foundation and raised some funds, we actually were challenged with finding researches with good research that was worth funding. That was less than 20 years ago. All of that has really changed, as Dr. Gerds was mentioning earlier, with the discovery of the JAK2 mutation, and the number of researches has really ballooned over the last 10 years or so. In fact, we have funded 67 projects across 63 researchers for a total of more than $12 million. We're quite proud of that. We're not done by any stretch of the imagination until we get to our goal of a cure or a pure chronic state. But the research in the field goes well beyond anything that we're involved with. There is lots of other funding mechanisms, the NIH, the National Institute of Health, for example, foundations across the globe. We work with academic institutions and researchers globally now. It used to just be the U.S., and so there is a lot of research going on. We also work with a lot of major biopharma firms. Several of them are committed to the MPN area, and this has proven to be quite promising because this is providing funding for clinical trials, which is not only offering hope for patients, but offering more research opportunities for the researchers.
Thank you, David. I love the fact that when you start that you're searching for researchers to give funding, or interested in money, and certainly that has changed a great deal. Funding has become a real big issue in research, and having enough funding. And as NIH funding has changed over time, I think it's more and more important that groups like the MPN Research Foundation have stepped forward to help advance the science of medicine, and it's become absolutely critical, organizations like yours, to really help out the scientists to get this work done to make patients' lives better. Because we are moving forward, and a lot of that is driven by basic science, folks in the lab working with cells and cultures and animal models and all kinds of things, but also largely by clinical trials, taking those discoveries, like the discovery of the JAK2 mutation, and designing good clinical trials in order to get that science to better patients' lives. And this is just a little snapshot of a website called clinicaltrials.gov. Clinicaltrials.gov is basically a warehouse, a listing of all the clinical trials that are ongoing, and it kind of both in the U.S. and outside the U.S. And it gives you kind of a snapshot of the amount of research going for the MPNs. And in this particular picture, I broke down by ET, PV, myelofibrosis. And so if you add all those up, that's pretty good, well over 600, 700 trials. And it is approaching that of more diseases that are more in everyone's conscious, such as acute leukemias or even breast cancer. We're not quite to the level of number of trials as breast cancer, but for a disease that is somewhat uncommon, I think the visibility is quite high, and we are doing a lot of work to better patient care. One of the big meetings that hematologists have every year is this thing called the American Society of Hematology annual meeting. and it's held in December every year. There are other large meetings where new research and clinical trials are presented, but this is certainly the big one for the U.S. And these are some of the clinical trials that were presented at the American Society of Hematology meeting just a few months ago in Atlanta, Georgia. And they're kind of fall into a couple of different categories. New medications that have in mouse models and other ways of exploring in the lab have shown to be beneficial at treating or killing MPN cells, and then that are now moving into the clinic, as well as combination therapies. How ruxolitinib has been an incredible success for the field and has bettered patient lives, but it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. How can we start to push that forward? Perhaps by adding another medication to it, we can get better responses. And then, despite lots of development, sometimes we take tried and true medications and try to work them in a different way to make them better. So the one big story here is interferons, and certainly interferons have been around for a very long time and are quite tried and true for the treatment of MPNs. But there are some newer versions of interferons and that seem to have a better profile with respect to efficacy or how well it treats the disease, as well as minimal side effects, which is certainly exciting. And then some other medications that have had some stumbling blocks along the way, such as fedratinib, have had a deeper look at those side effects, and it's been determined that the drugs are safer than what we thought, and and this research has allowed these drugs to again move forward and get closer to the clinic in order to help patients. Again, this is just a quick snapshot of all the research that's going on and just some of the things that were presented at this American Society of Hematology meeting. So in addition to all these oral abstracts, which, that's when the researcher gets up and presents the research with slides, there were a large number of posters as well with new developments in the field. So as someone who does both research and takes care of patients, this is always very exciting. And I think it's really rewarding to be at the front lines to take these treatments to patients to try to, again, make their lives better. And again, just to kind of hammer in on what are the areas of focus of research, one is developing new JAK inhibitors. Again, how can we capitalize on what we've done with ruxolitinib and get a better side effect profile or a more effective JAK inhibitor. And then another area is focusing on individual symptoms that a patient might have. I showed that table earlier where that listed the symptoms that were common in myelofibrosis, and this focus on symptoms can help direct treatment. In particular, a lot of work has been done on improving patients' fatigue in MPNs because this is a common symptom that really can burden patients. And one very interesting non-pharmacologic study that was done was looking at the use of yoga in patients with MPNs to improve their symptom burden. And in fact, regular exercise with yoga did improve their symptoms. So there's even non-pharmacologic or non-medication research that's going on as well. For anemia, there's a class of medications coming along that includes the drug luspatercept. And that has been showing so far to really improve patients' anemia. And anemia can be a big burden for some patients, particularly leading to fatigue and shortness of breath, as well as the need for transfusions. And transfusions can be a pretty result in quite a bit of time spent in the clinic by the time you drive to clinic, get your blood drawn, get the type and screen done, get the transfusion hung, and get it all in there. It can be a long day. So certainly I find medications that can help anemia out very exciting. And as I mentioned before, JAK inhibitors, particularly ruxolitinib, have really changed the way we look at these diseases, these MPNs, and how we treat them. And they do have their flaws, and how can we add in other medications to maybe make them work better? And the last category here are antifibrotics. These are medications that are designed to either delay or reverse the laying down of scar tissue in the bone marrow. And there have been a fair number of medications that have moved from early clinical trials into later clinical trials looking at ways to reverse that scar tissue and really delay the onset of complications for all the MPNs.